So welcome everyone to our Chapter Knowledge Series webinar today around PCI compliance. I would like to introduce Meredith and Ray, who are both with our headquarters team. Meredith is with our accounting department, and Ray is with our IT side of things, so he can get into some of the technical questions if there are any today. Please feel free to use the chat. If you have a specific question, we will wait till the end of Meredith's presentation for any questions, but feel free if you have any at any time to go ahead and drop that in the chat. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Meredith.
Thanks, Kelly, and hello, everyone. As Kelly said, my name is Meredith. I've talked to most of you, but for those of you who aren't familiar with me, boy, are you in for a treat. So I have nothing but corny jokes, and I'm here to share my love of all things compliance with you today. I have been the director of finance here with CAI for 10 years now. So most of you will hear from me when it comes time for rebates, because I'm the one who magically puts rebates into your bank accounts, which makes me your favorite person at CAI, I know. But I want to talk to you guys today about PCI compliance. And just to give you an overview, because I know that when you start talking about compliance, everybody gets a little on edge and it can be a very overwhelming thought. This is not going to be one of those overwhelming presentations. We're going to talk at a very high level about some compliance things. And before anybody starts freaking out, I have a very in-depth newsletter that Kelly is going to send to you guys after this is complete, which details a lot more than what we're going to cover today. So with that being said, I also brought along Ray Richards, who's our Senior Director of IT, to answer any questions, because PCI is a finance function, but it's also an IT function. And I know that I don't speak in technical terms, and I have to say to Ray, I'm not saying this right. So here's what I need it to be, and tell me how to understand the technical. So if there's anything that's technical in your questions, Ray is here to help us. So let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. All right. So let's jump right in. Today, the topic is PCI 4.0. And I know that the first thought is 4.0, what happened to 1.0 and 2.0? And we're going to talk about that. So let's jump in. So the basics of PCI. How on earth did we get here? And what is PCI? Not everybody lives and breathes finance and credit cards and data security the way that I do, the way that Ray does. So let's talk a little bit about some of the basics. PCI is the term that was agreed upon by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover. The big players in credit card processing got together, which is a room that none of us probably would have wanted to sit in while they tried to come to an agreement. But they got together in the early 2000s and they all acknowledged that we needed a basic minimum standard of security for anybody who is accepting a credit card. And I'm not talking about Home Depot or Target or even Starbucks, who processes hundreds of thousands of transactions. I am talking about if you process one credit card transaction, that means that you also have to be PCI compliant. There is no minimum on transactional threshold here. Okay. So they got together and they established the Security Council, and they decided here are the 12 core components in order for an organization to be PCI compliant. And in order to maintain this, we want there to be an annual review by the merchants, which in this case is us, CAI. There's an annual review. They have to do staff training. They have to have policies. This is the minimum that we're all ready to agree on. Okay. So the current PCI requirements, which we're operating under on the 13th of November, are here. It's a 12-step program. That irony is not lost on me. Okay. So it is maintaining a secure firewall, maintaining a password requirement, protect the data that you store, basic things that should be business best practices. Okay. Obviously, we're in a digital world now in post COVID. You shouldn't have members' credit card numbers scribbled on post it notes attached to the bottom of your monitor. I'm going, like, when I say that, just know that these are things that I've actually seen in my tenure of PCI compliance. Okay. So, restricting physical access to cardholder data, like that's what we're talking about. No post-it notes, no Excel file where you can open it and here's Kelly and here's her address and here's her credit card number and its expiration and its CVV. You should not have a shared document with that information where anybody can see it. Just things that are best practice. Okay. So as we've started to move from the early 2000s, when this was all first enacted, into a very different 2024 virtual world, they kind of got together, the Security Standards Board got back together and said, well, the world has changed. We have bot attacks, we have virtual everything. We don't think that some of this still applies. And also, we're acknowledging that as merchants are shifting their environment, we have to shift our restrictions as well. So they decided to come out with PCI 4.0. And I'm acknowledging that we're skipping over the other updates because they were really minimal updates in how to account for something. 4.0, which goes into effect March 31st of 2025, is the first sweeping standards change since its inception. Okay, so these other little things were very minor changes, and most of them were seamless through your hosting providers. So why are we changing into 4.0? 4 reasons. There's a security need that isn't being met from its initial inception to now, and that has to do with bot attacks, email phishing, all of those things that just, it wasn't a thing back in the early 2000s. Much simpler, more enjoyable time for all of us in our email boxes, I know. They wanted to promote security as a continuous process. Everyone had kind of gotten into this habit of PCI happens once a year. I know for us, it happens in the summer. So we're wrapping up our fiscal year. We're prepping for our audit. Oh, and by the way, maybe do that PCI self-assessment audit as well, because it's that time of year again. Well, they wanted to make this a continuous process so that you're looking at it and thinking of it in all of the things that you do. Enhanced validation methods, and I'll touch on those in a minute so that you can understand what that means. And then the flexibility, and this one actually is, I think, the best change to PCI 4.0, is that they're understanding that you can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to PCI compliance. What works for me at headquarters doesn't work for the small chapter with all part-time staff who potentially is running less than 20 credit card transactions annually. You have to be flexible in your volume and your environment. And so that's really what they've done here, which is a fantastic change because it makes PCI manageable for everybody. Okay. So the big takeaways for PCI 4.0 are up here on the screen. I'm not going to read them. You're going to get them in this handout. The handout is going to go through every single change, and it's going to detail this requirement had no change and this requirement had this change and elaborate on it. So you'll get that, and Kelly will get that sent to you by the end of the week. Okay. But I do want to touch on a couple of these because, as I said earlier, these are best practice items that every organization who takes credit card or sensitive information from members should be doing anyway. If you've got a password protection on your items, it's changing the way that you structure it. Your passwords should be changing every 90 days anyway. And now it's saying, hey, let's not just have 7 characters, let's make it 12. Let's make it what everyone is used to as a strong password. So there's an alphanumeric component in there. And let's make sure that that's a requirement across the board. That's a best practice security standard. Multi-factor is happening. So multi-factor for us at headquarters works in a number of different ways. We have an app just to be able to get into our hubs, into our emails, into this. But from the finance perspective, if I take a step back, I also have a multi-factor authentication to get into my credit card processor screen. And most of your credit card processors, if you go in and log in to research a transaction or initiate a refund, dispute a chargeback, pull reports, all of that stuff, your credit card processor should be enacting multi-factor authentication with you sometime between now and the end of the year. The credit card processors had a goal of making that happen by the end of the calendar year. It will be a PCI requirement starting in March 31st of 2025. Things like that. Keeping an inventory of everything that touches your system, keeping these processes documented. These are all things that are just being elaborated on in this new process. Okay. And when I get into documentation of processes, I know that kind of shifts from PCI a little bit into SOPs and documentation of processes. And I love that just as much as I love PCI. So I could talk about systems process documentation all day long. It can be overwhelming to start from nothing and try to build out these policies on all of your processes. And that's not what this is meant to be by any means. Documenting your process can be as simple as open a Word document and say, okay, starting from scratch, here I am. How do we process credit cards? Well, step one, our members don't email us data. This could be your process. This isn't ours because our members do. So I'll touch on that in a second. We ask them not to email us. We ask them to call us. And when they call us, our receptionist can't take a credit card number. It has to be this person or this person. You just document how your natural flow of business is. And I saw Tony on the call, so I'm going to pick on Tony because that's, I don't know, arguably just enjoyable for everybody, right? Love you, Tony. So Tony needs to document a process that says, I'm the only one who can take a credit card. And when I take a credit card, I'm going to type it directly into my database. I'm not going to write it in a notebook. I'm not going to write it on a Post-it note. I'm not going to type it in an email. Great. That's documenting your processes, which meets these requirements. If for some reason you have a member who emails you, this is how you handle it, right? You're going to document this process as well. And, Kelly, that really stubborn member who drives us all crazy, has emailed Tony her credit card number, even though we've asked her 50 times not to. So Tony knows he's going to log into the system. He's going to process that credit card number. He's going to delete Kelly's email with her credit card and going to remember to go into his deleted box and delete it from there so that it's fully deleted as much as you can remove something from the internet, right? Just doing a simple Word document to lay these things out is all that's needed. It doesn't have to be 7 pages of every single scenario. Start small and you meet the requirement. All we're doing here is checking boxes on the self-assessment. Okay, so the other piece to this that I want to make a point to say is if you're using a database system, they're probably covering 80 to 90% of this for you without you even knowing. Fantastic. They've got certificates, they've got their audits, they've got encryption and all of that that's needed. But it's not their responsibility to make sure you are PCI compliant. Tony, in his chapter, needs to be completing the self-assessment annually. And he also needs to be asking hey, database provider, send me your certificate, your PCI certificate. And some of them you have to put in a service request. I know for us, we've got to put in a support ticket in order to get that certificate. We do it annually. It's a checkbox part of our audit. Sometimes you can call your rep and say, hey, I want to see our PCI certificate. They're legally required to provide that to you. The same goes for your credit card provider. If they've got a web portal for you to use transactions, they have to maintain that that is secure and they have to turn over their certificates for you. It's not their responsibility to keep me compliant. It's my responsibility to verify and then submit your self audit. So I talk fast and I've thrown a lot at you. So I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I can't see the chat in all of this. 18 screens is definitely not enough. So yeah, Susan, one auth for multi-factor authentication. Yeah. For those of you who are using Microsoft, and this is where I'm putting on my somewhat technical, but not in the right terms, technical hat that Ray cringes at. For Microsoft, we use all of the Microsoft suite, and the Microsoft Authenticator is just built in right there as well. So I can only log in so many times before it starts screaming at me to open my phone. So does anyone have any questions, or does anyone want us to touch on something specific or something that you guys are seeing? Crickets. I love it. Ray, since you're off mute, I'm going to ask, is there anything on the technical side that you think is seemingly daunting, but really isn't?
A couple of things that I want to point out is, I've been at CAI a little bit over a year. And when I came here, we had a number of physical servers on site. We had a number of cloud-based servers. I consolidated all of the servers and shut them all down and moved us over to like SharePoint for data. So we do not have any direct servers under our control. So I am not, and my department is not worried about updating servers and are we exposed to the internet? We utilize third parties for our financial system, our website, our association management system, and put the burden on them. We're paying you every month. You keep everything up to date. When we need compliance information, we go back to the experts that do that. So we have a very minimalistic network, and that exposes us. The exposure we have is slim to none. And we utilize, as Meredith said, the Microsoft suite of products that all kind of mesh together, and that multi-factor application is included with that. And we use that application for other pieces of things to log into to utilize that product. So the less you have, the better it is for you. And again, we utilize experts to take care of these types of things and not try to do everything ourselves. So that's really it from, I think, from my side of things. But Meredith was right. A lot of these policies and procedures can be daunting. It's just a matter of documenting what you're doing. It does not have to be, if you were to Google, some of these documents, it's really exhaustive and elaborate. And it can be as simple as just documenting how you handle things. Um, so hope this helps you all with things because it is very daunting initially, and if you look at it on the simplistic side, it's not that bad.
Yeah, and I know, one of the requirements that PCI has always maintained is the annual staff training, right? Well, I'm 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 a rinse and repeat kind of a gal. My staff training is, I don't know, 5 to 7 minutes at this point because the first training is the extensive one. I capture new hires and talk to them as they come. And then after that, it's a, hey guys, here we are. This is a reminder. You're used to this every year. Here's what you have to watch out for. If you think there's any kind of violation, you need to come and talk to me. Boom, and we're done. So these things, once you get the first initial round of checking all of this audit compliance off, it becomes very easy to just maintain. And that was one of the shifts that they were making here. Make this a continuous process. Make this something that you're always thinking about. Hey, we're going to have a new process in place for this. Does it touch PCI? Is there any way we need to think about PCI for this or any kind of security? Yes. Move this direction. No, move this direction. If you start thinking of it continuously, once a year, I think it takes just a few minutes for us to fill out our self audit now. And it's a combination of Ray and I saying, has anything changed? Nope. Great. Check the box. We run security scans. Did we fail? Ooh, junk. Let's fix it. Did we pass? Great. Move on. It's a much bigger battle if you're starting from scratch. But once you get in this and once you start thinking of it in your mindset, this really isn't a daunting task.
No, and if you do recall, there was a piece on this about cybersecurity training. And, for CAI, what we do, we partner with a company called Know Before, and we have quarterly training that goes out to all staff. They have to watch a video. And now that we're approaching the end of this year, I go back to my rep and I say, I need a program for 2025. Let's figure out quarter one, two, three, and four, what I want. I set it up and it's automated and it's done. That's a very exhaustive process, and not everybody needs to probably go through such, but you need to have some sort of training to be able to check that box. It doesn't tell you how or what or how often. I utilize experts for everything. So I ask my rep, how often should we be doing this? Every quarter. And that's what we do. And again, it's just checking the box, like Meredith said. It's on my agenda in the next 30 days to reach out to my rep and produce one for the upcoming year.
Yeah. And when Ray says, utilize experts, that's really what this is designed to be. Keeping our database secure, it's not our job, it's their job. That's what we pay them for. But Ray has to ask, we have to ask every year, hey, how are we doing? So it really is, it's I understand it perfectly fine, and I don't have that technical mentality. Ray understands the financial component of it, and he doesn't have that financial lingo down like I do. It's not impossible for anyone. You just have to sit down and kind of dig in. And what I'm sending out this afternoon is we'll kind of give you the what are the new requirements for dummies component. I found the graphics that I'm sending out helpful because I understood them from the non-technical perspective. So they did a really good job of saying, hey, let's write something for non-financial and non-technical people to understand why security is important. So, yeah. And now, because, I have to say this every time I talk to you guys about something that's financial, tax, or compliance related, we cannot be your compliance go-to. We are happy, Ray and I are happy for you guys to say, hey, I'm stuck on requirement 3.1. I don't understand what it's asking for. And Ray and I are going to happily say, all right, here's what they mean, right? We can't complete your audits for you. We can't fix compliance holes for you, but we can help make sure that you're understanding it and understanding that this is a digestible component. See, I pick on Tony and now he thinks he gets to ask questions.
I was just actually wondering, Meredith, if there's a sample policy that you can, like maybe the national office has a payment card policy, rules, et cetera, that you can share with chapters.
So I do have, I'll have to pull it back up. I think I'll have to get it from our HR team because I wrote a credit card security policy too long ago for our staff of how we want to keep our information secure. Let me pull that back. I will not get that to you with this initial newsletter because I want to get this in your hands, but I will make sure that by next week we get you that policy and you can see what it looks like. Now, it's a lot of small word. It's a lot of small type because it's a lot of words and we tried to fit it onto minimal one page. So it looks a little scarier than it is, but it basically is saying, Don't take credit cards if you don't need them. Don't write it down. Don't share it. Don't, come on, guys. Don't give somebody your password. I jokingly, every time I turn my computer over to Ray, who's the head of IT, and he says, I need your password, my response to him is always like, I'm not supposed to give my password out because IT doesn't like it, right? I joke about it, but this is kind of what our policy says, but I'm absolutely happy to share it with you guys. And if you want to poach it completely and just put your logo on it instead of mine, I don't care because it checks the box for you. So, because I poached 90% of it from other sources as well. So.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions for Meredith or Ray? All right. If you do, again, on our staff listing that's in the toolkit, we do have their contact information for you to feel free to contact them directly if you do have specific, again, questions relating to anything PCI compliance that you might not understand or just need a clearer understanding for. I will go ahead and I will get that. I think you were calling it a newsletter, Meredith,
Yes.
over to everyone who's on today. Otherwise, we will also include that in the weekly. And then once we get the sample from Meredith of the policy, we'll make sure that's also in the weekly email and also in the toolkit as well for the future. So thank you all for joining us. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in that handout that I'm sending, Ray and I's email addresses are linked in there as well for quick reference. So definitely feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. We're under the same pressure that everyone else is under to get this done by March 31st. The scary thing is that if you're not compliant, they can come after you and not let you process credit cards. And that's not what any of us want. So reach out. We're here to help. We're here to help you decipher some of this. And it's really a manageable process.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, Meredith and Ray, and everyone who joined us. So I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, everyone.